Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope that your day is off to a good start. Mine is so far. I'm actually in my real office this morning. I'm going to be talking about Bibles today, and it was easier to do this from here than to carry a whole stack of Bibles to the house. So for today, I'm going to give you what I think are the five best. If you're going to the Christian bookstore, or you're going online to CBD, Christian Book Distributors, and you want to buy a Bible, what should you get? So I'm going to give you five that I would start with, and amongst the five, I'll tell you the one that I use personally, and then I think I'll toss in a bonus as well. And so there, I've talked about Bibles a couple of years ago. I went through, 9 or 10 different translations, and literally there are probably dozens of English language translations of the Bible, some very good, some not worth the paper they're printed on. So of that whole alphabet soup, I'm going to give you the five that I would begin with if I were you. You cannot say just one Bible is the best, because they are all good for different purposes. Some Bibles are better for one thing than for another. A Bible that is really good for careful study may not be the best thing if you want to just read something devotionally before you go to bed at night. So I'm going to give you five that I think are the best, and then you can go from there. And also, one other thing with the Bible, it's sort of like a good pair of shoes. The Bible that works for you is going to be subjective. Like, you slide on a pair of shoes, you go to the store and you try on 4 different pairs of shoes till you get the pair that just feels right. And that's part of it. What is it that just feels right? So I'm going to give you my 5, and these are just my opinion. So let me begin with the NIV. This is an NIV Bible right here. Don't know whether you can see it on the spine there, the NIV. The NIV was a translation that was begun back in the 70s. It was begun back in the 70s, first published as an entire Bible in 84, and then there have been several different revisions and editions done since then. Most recently, it was updated in 2011, and with the 2011 update, the previous editions actually are no longer available in the bookstore. So this one here is the 84 edition, and if you go to a bookstore, you're getting the one from 2011. So what about the NIV? The NIV, from the outset, was intended to be something that would be fairly easy to read. From the outset is intended to be something that is very easy to read, easy to interpret. As with all of the Bibles that I will mention today, the translation was done by a committee of top-notch scholars in their fields, scholars in Greek and Hebrew. The NIV, like I said, it was intended from the outset to be relatively easy to read. I think it is geared towards 7th grade reading level. In terms of translation philosophy, it's not a particularly literal translation. Some translations are very literal. This one is not particularly literal. It aims more towards what does the phrase mean, rather than giving you a literal translation. And by the way, there's no such thing as really a literal translation of the Bible, because languages work differently. But anyway, the NIV is a good Bible. It's not perfect. It's not great for detailed study, but it's a good all-around Bible, and you can't go wrong with it. Okay, so next, the New Living Translation. Let's see. I don't know if you can. New Living Translation. The New Living Translation has an interesting history. It goes back to the Living Bible. Some of you may remember them. They're the fat green hardback Bibles from the early 70s. And the Living Bible was a paraphrase of existing translations, primarily the King James. And it was done just to help people read it because, well, the King James is not easy to read. But it was a paraphrase, meaning that all you're doing is you're working from an existing English translation and you're tinkering with that rather than going back to the original Greek and Hebrew. So what happened with the New Living Translation is they began with the thought that we needed to update, we needed to tweak the Living Bible. And committee got together, and as they looked at it, they decided that really the best thing to do would be to just make a new translation. And that's what we have here. We have a new translation. This is not a paraphrase. It's a new translation. Again, like with all of these Bibles, committee of scholars that are really good in their fields, be it Old Testament or New Testament, Greek, Hebrew, etc. And the end result is a Bible that is very easy to read. It wouldn't be really good for careful study, but it would be great if you just want something that's easy to read, to pick up to read before you go to bed at night. The New Living Translation came out in the late 90s, like 98, 99, 2000, in that time frame. There are portions of it that they're charming. They really are sort of charming the way it is translated. One thing about this, it is thought for thought, not like word for word, though word for word isn't really possible. Another thing, it's not totally gender neutral, but they change some traditional gender language. So you might see brother and sister, where literally in Greek it says brother, or in things like that. They, I think, will still use sort of the ubiquitous he pronoun, but instead of man, says say one, or a person, something like that. But anyway, if you're looking for a Bible that is that's easy to read and a charming Bible to read, this would be it. But I wouldn't recommend it if you're going to heavy duty Bible study. It probably wouldn't serve you very well for that. Okay, and then that gets me to this is the English Standard Version. This came along about the same time as the New Living Translation. In the same time frame, I think the ESV was first published in 2001, if memory serves me right. This, by the way, is it's my personal favorite. It's the one that is sort of my default. I use other Bibles from time to time, but it's my default. And like I said, the analogy that I used is what's comfortable. You go to the shoe store and you try on several pairs of shoes till you find the pair that just fits. And that's the case of the ESV for me. So with the ESV, the particulars, it is a relatively literal translation. If you've got this spectrum of translations from very literal to very loose, the ESV is over here on the more literal side. It would not be as easy to read as the NIV, but the trade-off is that it is more exact. It's more exact than the NIV. The ESV retains some of the cadence of the King James. It's in the broader King James family tree. Retains some of the cadence of it, but obviously doesn't have the these and thous, etc. And it's a really, really good all-round Bible. Like I said, it's the one that I use the most. It fits me, and it is the one that I preach from and that I use for my Bible studies. And then that gets us to the next one, the New American Standard Bible, the NASB. The NASB is also over here in terms of being a pretty literal translation. It's probably maybe even a little more literal than the English Standard Version. The NASB comes in, it has a history as well. It was first published in 1977. Then there was a revision done in 1995, and then another pretty significant revision done in 2020. So with the New American Standard Version, it's like I said, it's considered by a lot of people the most literal of the versions. The trade-off is that there are places where the English doesn't work very well. If languages work differently, and if you want to try to be really literal in how you handle the Greek and the Hebrew, then you're going to sometimes end up with English, which isn't very good. And that is the trade-off with the New American Standard Bible. It's always been, the knock on it always been that it's sometimes the English is a bit clunky. It's not particularly easy to read, but it is very, very good for careful study. The 2020 revision of this is my 95 edition, and then a couple of years ago, I picked up this. I'm sure you can't read it on the spine. I picked up the 2020 variation of it. The 2020 edition of it did two things. It didn't go totally gender neutral, but it tinkered with gender language a little bit, because that's a big issue in some circles. Also, it did try to make the Bible a bit more readable. So I do have this, and I've read through it some, but it just doesn't fit me like the English Standard Version. It's a good Bible, but not the best. It's a good Bible, particularly if you're heavy deep into the weeds. But that is my take on it. It still makes my top 5. And then the last one is the New Revised Standard. You can see it on the spine here, NRSV. The New Revised Standard Version came along in the late 80s. Same broad tree as the King James. All the versions that I've mentioned so far do come from a real committee of good scholars. They all use the best available Greek and Hebrew manuscripts. They all make use of, to one extent or another, the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were discovered in the late 1940s. So with the New Revised Standard Version, this version is very popular in mainline Protestant circles. United Methodist Church, PCUSA, um, Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, etc. The Episcopal Church is very popular in mainline Protestant circles. The biggest thing, the real significant thing with the NRSV is that it is very gender neutral. So they all the way throughout consistently will use brothers and sisters, where the Greek may just say brothers, humankind instead of mankind, and not using the ubiquitous generic he pronoun. Now, a lot of times this is perfectly fine and it doesn't change a thing. There are a handful of cases where they switched it, where they went gender neutral, where really it shouldn't have, in my opinion. One more thing that I will mention about this, with the New Revised Standard Version, you sometimes end up with, in their attempt to be strictly gender neutral, you end up with some wording which is really clunky. It's like they go in from the outset and, okay, you've got a nice, perfectly legitimate verse translated in English, and okay, we got to go back in and make it gender neutral, and that results in some things that are clunky, they probably could have spent some more time to make that verse, they could have probably massaged it more to make it better, more readable. One other drawback to the New Revised Standard Version, and this is just a personal opinion, I don't think they do the Psalms very well at all. But again, that's a personal opinion. But the New Revised Standard Version it's a good Bible. It's not the one that I use, but it's a good Bible. And if a Bible that is gender neutral really is important for you, definitely get this one. All right, those are my 5. If you had to pick a Bible and you're going down to the Christian bookstore, these are my 5. You get one of them. The New International Version, the New Living Translation, the ESV. And the ESV is my personal favorite. It doesn't necessarily have to be yours. The New American Standard, and the New Revised Standard Version. Okay, and I'm going to give you a bonus. A bonus is going to be King Jimmy. Okay, King Jimmy. I give you King Jimmy, the King James, not because it is the best Bible out there right now. I don't think it is. At the time the King James was translated, heck, over 500 years ago now, the manuscripts available to them just weren't as good as what we have now. There are far better Greek editions of the New Testament that are better than what they had available then. There are better Hebrew manuscripts. This is several hundred years before the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, which really helped Old Testament translation. King James has these and thous, which are difficult for us moderns to read. But here's the thing with the King James. The King James is simply the most important work in the history of the English language. It's simply the most important work in the history of the English language. And so for that reason, it's good to have around. I don't read from it much because there are better translations now, and because there are things that are just hard. I do read from the King James. I use King James at Christmas. I really do. it just, when I hear and read the Christmas stories in Luke and Matthew, it's just King James. I'll also mention that the King James does the Psalter really, really well. The Psalms in King James are just beautiful. So, King James is hard to read, and there are better translations because the manuscripts are better now. But it's important to have one simply because of how important this translation is in the formation of the English language. So, that's my 2 or 3 cents worth. If you're going to buy a Bible, I would get one of these 5: New International Version, the New Living Translation, the English Standard Version, which is my personal favorite, the New American Standard, and the New Revised Standard, with a bonus being the King James, simply because it's such a monument in the English language. So with that being said, I hope you have a great rest of your day.